Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Irina Chudnovskaya. I'm an associate professor at Lomonosov Moscow State University, Russia, and my topic is the potential of mass communication in the formation of inclusive culture in education. Education is the social institution with which any member of society deals in one way or another. The educational sphere is a reflection of social relations inherent in a particular society, with a system of views on the hierarchy of rights that has developed in it. International regulatory documents are aimed at minimizing existing social gaps, while the regulatory framework of individual states focuses on their own specifics, in particular in the field of inclusive education. Inclusive education can be defined as an organization of the learning process in which all students, regardless of their physical, mental, intellectual, cultural, ethnic, linguistic, and other characteristics, are included in the general education system and study together with their peers in the same educational institution of a general type, which take into account their special educational needs and provide their students with the necessary special support. As the content analysis of Russian regulatory documents has shown, due to historical and social reasons, in Russian practice, inclusion implies, first of all, an attitude towards persons with disabilities, disabled persons. Inclusive education involves the in-depth development of at least three components: inclusive policies, inclusive activities, and inclusive culture. These components are mutually dependent, but if the former are developed mainly by the state and public organizations, an inclusive culture is associated with a broad public opinion and attitude, which, as practice shows, in reality can act as a powerful barrier to the implementation of the first two components. This circumstance leads to the conclusion that it is necessary to create a theory of inclusive culture, and especially in the field of education. Inclusive culture as a concept took shape in the scientific educational discourse relatively recently, at the turn of the century. An inclusive culture is based on principles such as humanism, nonviolence, accessibility, protection, awareness, support for diversity, individual assistance, community membership, cooperation between all participants in the educational process, pedagogical optimism, etc. Building an inclusive culture in a society means continuously working to establish and maintain inclusive values and stereotypes that are generated either as a result of personal experience or through mass communication. We have carried out applied research in order to find out the features of constructing an inclusive culture in society through the mass media. In this study, the mass media were analyzed in two functional aspects: as a means for informing and a means for mass cultural influence, based on the typology proposed by Valeria Konetskaya. Television, internet news sites, forums, blogs, and social networking sites were analyzed as media. The choice of this empirical base is also due to the fact that, according to a study conducted by the Public Opinion Foundation, FORM, in 2019, the population of Russia mainly chooses television, news sites on the internet, as well as forums, blogs, and social networking sites as a source of information. Cinematography, fiction, theater, and entertainment were considered as means of mass influence. As a result of the content analysis of Russian media texts, a correlation was noted between the dominant communicative stereotypes of persons with disabilities with the main models of inclusion: segregation, integration, and social inclusion. The segregation model assumes the forced isolation of persons with disabilities from the society of normally developing peers. It is more consistent with the communicative representation of persons with disabilities on the principle of other, alien. The integration approach assumes that persons with disabilities must accept and follow the norms characteristic of the prevailing culture. He/she either adapts to the system or becomes unacceptable for it, while the education system itself remains unchanged. This approach is consistent with an ambivalent communicative representation of persons with disabilities on the basis of the victim-hero principle. An inclusive approach emphasizes the need for changes in the education system itself, which should take into account the special educational needs of students and not adapt them to the already existing requirements of standard educational institutions. In mass communication, this approach is consistent with the representations of persons with disabilities, with the predominance of the use of the hero image. Based on the methodological basis of the cultivation hypothesis and agenda setting, it can be argued that such a representation of persons with disabilities can increase the level of empathy towards them among the audience of mass communication, thereby influencing the inclusive culture of this audience. Within the framework of the study, in a comparative manner, the representation of the topic of inclusion in television programs, that is, in traditional mass communication, and in new media, that is, in a new form of mass self-communication, according to Manuel Castells, was also considered. The empirical base of the study was the Russian segment of the media space. On the basis of quantitative data, it is concluded that there is a general increase in social interest in the issues of inclusion and inclusive education, and a significant increase in interest in it in the internet space over the past decade. Our full article provides numerical metrics for this growth. As a result of the research, it can be argued that mass communication in its traditional institutional form and in a new form of mass self-communication, through the setting and information agenda and the representation of relevant stereotypes of people with disabilities, can form an inclusive culture that determines the implementation of equal rights in education. Thank you for your attention.